Good morning, sir. Manoj, sir, good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, madam. Yeah, good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon. How are
Good
you?
afternoon. So, dear participant, now the resource person already joined. We are very happy today in the last session. We have Prof Alka Maurya, madam, from the Amity University. So, welcome you, madam, in this FIP program once again. Last week also, we, madam, have given one lecture, very good lecture in our one short-term course. So, dear participant, madam is going to talk about the communication, importance of the communication in the education. So, madam is a very eminent scholar and administrative, also holding the administrative position. So, madam, on behalf of the HRDC and Mizoram University, I welcome you in this FIP program. And directly, without taking a lot of time, I am handing over the session to you for your lecture and presentation, madam.
Thank you, Manoj, sir. And today I can see that I can access the chat window because as I've done in the previous session, I would like to have some interaction with the student. So I can see Professor Barnali Thakuria and Sadiqa Ahmed and Prasanjeet Roy and Saramesh also are there and this someone 235186. So good afternoon to all of you. And I have planned an interactive session. So I would like to have responses from your end also to ensure that we have a two-way communication rather than a monologue from my end only. So just give me a minute. I'll share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, madam, visible. Please make it presentation mode now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it fine now? Just a minute. I would need some time also to keep the chat window open. Perfect now. So as per schedule, I'm here to give, we are here for a discussion on effective communication skills. And before I start with my presentation, this is how I have organized the presentation. First of all, we'll try and understand what actually is communication, what communication process is all about, what are various modes of communication, what is required to be an effective communicator, and how you can become a good communicator, what are 7 C's of communication, what are communication challenges for teachers, and what are etiquettes specifically over email and video conferences. So these are a few of the topics I'll be touching upon in my presentation. So before we move ahead, right, the first question that comes to our mind is, whenever we are attending a session like this, the first question is, what is communication? So I would like to listen and not listen. I would like to see the responses from the audience as to what, according to you, is communication. Is it just speaking and listening? So the question to the audience is, that is communication only listening and speaking, or is it something more than that? So whatever comes to your mind, whatever word you can associate with communication, if you can just write it in the chat window, right? Professor Barnali Thakuria have written that it's both listening and interaction. Tony NG, according to him, it's passing of information, exchanging of thoughts, Dr. Prasanjeet. Exchanging ideas, something more, Mohammed Israfil have written. Body language, good, right? Fine. So when we talk about communication, it is not just about speaking and listening, because only 10% of the communication comprises of words, which we choose to communicate, whether it is a written communication or an oral communication, right? So only 10% of our communication is words, 30% is tone. Even as a teacher, all of us would have faced this number of times in the classes. That at times, we are soft with the students when we are teaching them, when we are continuing with our lessons. But at times, we also are strict with them. We have trying to increase the pitch of our communication so that we can maintain maybe the discipline in the class. And 60% is the body language, right? So communication is not just listening and speaking, it's also about what is your pitch, what is tone of your at which you are speaking, and also what is your body language. And when we talk about communication process, right? Right now I'm communicating with all of you. So I'm a sender and you are a receiver, right? So these are the two parties in any communication process. We have one sender and then we have another receiver. And then we have a channel through which we communicate. Right now, Zoom is a channel, so we are using a digital platform to communicate with each other. It also can be class too, where the teacher is interacting with the students. The communication can also happen on email. So there are various modes by which we communicate with each other. Then there also can be, at times, there can be noise in the entire communication process. All of us would have noticed it during the initial days of lockdown, that when we started with the online mode of teaching, learning, we had, I'm sure all of you also can recall various instances wherein, we might have left our mic on, like we have not muted our mic, right? It had happened initially in most of the online conferences, but one or the other participant, they forgot to mute their mic. And because of that, there was noise in the entire webinar or conference or whatever. And the speaker had to pause for a while. And after that, they continued once the mics were muted, right? So at times also in the class also, while we are teaching, we notice that the students at times try to create nuisance in the class. Maybe they start looking at their mobile phone, which is a normal phenomena these days. So that also disturbs the teacher. So noise can be of any manner. There can be all of a sudden the students can start murmuring, whispering, and so on. So in the communication process, there also have to be noise, and we have to ensure that we filter the noise to ensure that we get the right communication. There is a right communication between the sender and the receiver. Then when we talk about sender and receiver, the next question that comes to our mind is, since all of us are teachers out here, so the next question is, who are our receivers? As a teacher, when we are there in our institution, in our university, in our business schools, who according to you are your receivers? You are the sender. When you're there in the class, you are the sender. When you are outside the class, you are also communicating. So whether you are inside the class or outside the class, who are your receivers? So can all of you please share your responses in the chat window? Who are our receivers? Students are receivers. Dr. Sadiq Ahmed is the first one to respond. Can we have responses from others also? Learners, Dr. Prasenjit Roy have mentioned. Good, doctor. Okay, students again, Dr. Nifa Nasifa. Can we have few more responses? Students is a common response which we are getting from the audience. Fine. Fine. Again, students is what Dr. Barnali, Thakuri, and Mohammed Israfil have mentioned. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. So when we talk about the receivers, right, apart from the students whom we interact on a regular basis, Dr. Biplab have mentioned that it's students, friends, and learners, right? So when, as a teacher, when we are there inside the class or we are outside the class, our receivers are a student, right, whom we are teaching as part of our curriculum. Then we also have peers within and outside the organization. Maybe we are communicating with the faculty members of other courses. We are communicating with faculty members outside our institutions, maybe for various research initiatives. We are communicating with them, maybe to invite them for a guest lecture, as Dr. Manoj sir have done, is doing, right, of a past 1 month. He's communicating with all the academicians and ensuring that they come and attend the conference. So we also communicate with our peers. We communicate with our subordinates. Maybe if all of us are doctorate, we might be having research scholars, or maybe the staff in our organization. We are communicating with them also to ensure that certain tasks which have been assigned to us are completed on time. We also are interacting with the parents of the student. At times, the student might have problem in terms of they have a medical exigency, or they are not able to come to college because of XYZ reason. So because of that, we're interacting with students, we're interacting with the HODs, we're interacting with the top management, and we're also interacting with our own family members. That is what Dr. Biplab Das have mentioned, that her receivers are our students, learners, and our friends. Now, the next point is that do we communicate in same way with all of them? Right? Again, I look forward to the response. The question is, if our receivers are our students, our peers, subordinates, parents, HODs, top management, and family members, then do we communicate in same way with all of them? Or there is difference? If there is a difference, then why? What sort of difference is there when we communicate with students, when we communicate with parents, with top management, with HOD, and so on? So why, and what kind of difference do you normally see when you are communicating with different receivers you are communicating with? Dr. Prasanjeet have mentioned that the tone, body language is different when we are talking to the students. Our tone when we are there in the class and when we are interacting with the students is different while we are outside the class. Maybe we are talking to them in a slightly friendly way when we are outside the class, when we are meeting our students outside the class. But when we are inside the class, our tone is different. Maybe we are guiding them, we are counseling them when we are outside the class. But when we are inside the class, to ensure that we are able to convey complete our session on time, and we are able to deliver our lectures, our tone is slightly different. Similarly, when we're talking to the parents, to HOD subordinates, our way of communicating is different for each one of them. Also, we use different modes of communication in our day-to-day life. And there are various medias nowadays which are being used for communication purpose. And after COVID, the online thing definitely have gained importance in the post-COVID era. But out of the various modes of communication that are being used, there are some which are very rich in the entire communication process, whereas there are few which lacks the richness. Say, for example, when we are using memo, letters, email, right? These are the media which are used frequently, but do not have rich communication with between the sender and the receiver, because it is just one-way communication. If I've written an email to maybe one of the parents, I have to wait for some time till the time they read and then reply to my email. But whereas when we talk about face-to-face conversation, which is the richest mode of communication, right? Because the sender and the receiver both are communicating face-to-face, and in case there is a doubt, right, you can simply raise your hand and ask questions, so that your doubts, everything are resolved during at that particular moment itself. Right? If a parent have a grievance, right? If they are writing an email, right? Maybe the issue might be resolved maybe within by 1, 2, 3, 4 days. But when they are physically present in the campus and they are discussing about the problem of their child with the teacher, definitely the entire process will be faster. So that is why when we say video conference, face to face, these are slightly rich communication mode as compared to memos, letters, email, voicemail, telephonic conversation, and so on. Now, this again a quiz. There'll be 3, 4 quiz during the entire presentation. So the first quiz is what is communication, and the options for you is exchanging thoughts, ideas, and messages through speech and body language, imparting information, C, communication is a system such as mail, telephone, or television for sending messages. And D is all of them. Fine. So we have a response from Dr. Prasanji. We have mentioned D, which is the correct answer. So when we talk about communication, it comprises of all the aspects: exchanging thoughts, imparting information, and using a mode for communicating with each other. Thank you for all your responses. I can see, responses really coming fast from the participants. Good to see that. Now, the topic of today's presentation is strategies for effective communication. So the question is why we need to be effective in our communication, right? Two important aspects are, first of all, that we know that effective communication is good for our professional and personal success. And secondly, effective communication also is being seen as an indicator of intelligence, right? So even though we might be having good content, good knowledge, but if we are not able to communicate it properly, right, we might not be able to succeed in the endeavor. Say, for example, I'm a maths teacher, right? And I have very good conceptual knowledge of maths. But if I'm not able to impart it to the students, right, they will, then my communication, it does not mean anything. I've seen, in fact, during our school days also, I'm seeing the same thing for my kids. They say that two subjects which they find very difficult are, first is maths, then is science, and the third one is history. Unfortunately, I have a good friend who happens to be a professor of history, and I've seen her teaching the students. Right in our school days, I've seen in our history classes, the teacher used to make us stand and read one page so that we are able to learn what is there in the textbook. But when I see her teaching history, right, she has a passion for teaching. So when she has a passion, students don't know when the class starts and when the class ends, right? So apart from having knowledge, it is also very important that we should also know about how the knowledge have to be passed on. So that is why effective communication is essential in today's life. Then, if good communication is so important, then which are the various skills that are required to become a good communicator? Again, a question for all the participants, and I look forward to your response in the chat window. What, according to you, right, are important skills that one should have to become a good communicator? And one thing which I always tell my students is, don't be scared of sharing your thoughts, right? You might be wrong, you might be right? If you have given a right response, it's good, right? Even if you have given a wrong response, you have learned a new thing, right? So don't stop communicating. First of all, we have to, erase this fear from our mind that if I'll be wrong, people will laugh at me, right? The day we will be able to overcome this fear, that day, we will start learning to be a good communicator, right? So the question to the participants is, which skills are required to become a good communicator? Dr. Prasanji, as always, the first one to respond. He has mentioned clarity and confidence. Good, sir. Can we have responses from other participants also? Wow, Dr. Nafia have written vocabulary, body language, voice modulation, and being able to relate to the listener, empathy. Good. Are we expecting few more responses from the other participants also? I'll wait for 30 seconds. Good. Dr. Ahmed, confidence with knowledge. Good. Fine. So I'll move to the next slide. So when we talk about various skills which are essential to become a good communicator are, first of all, you should have content, right? Trust me, if you will have good content, you will be able to communicate properly, right? Because the idea is, if you have content, you anyhow will ensure that you are able to impart knowledge to the person sitting in front of you. But if you do not have a content, right, you will not be able to put across your thoughts. If someone asked me if Manoj sir would have, called me to give a session for about 15 minutes on finance, right, I would have outrightly said no. because I know I'm not good at finance. International business is one of my specialization. If anyone asks me to give lecture on communication, interpersonal skills, and international business and so on, these are the areas where I'm good at, and I can readily accept the invitations, right? But if someone asks me to talk about maybe blockchain and AI and so on, definitely it will be difficult for me to speak on these topics because I do not have rich content. So rich content is the first and the foremost skill. If you are having absolutely clear, crystal clear knowledge of a subject, right? Definitely the words will automatically flow and you will be able to convince and share the knowledge with the audience. Second thing is confidence, right? You should have confidence of speaking in class. You should have confidence for public speaking and so on. And trust me, like all of us, when we would have spoken for the first time on public platform, all of us had been nervous, right? Till date, even if I have to go for uh, keynote speeches in international conferences, I remember last time I was there in Vietnam, and when I was about to start, I was very shaky and very nervous, right? So you also have to develop a confidence which will come over a period of time. So first time you'll be slightly nervous. Second time, the level of nervousness will be slightly less and so on. So as and when you will gain experience of speaking on a particular topic number of times, your confidence automatically will increase. So your confidence will increase because of content. Your confidence will increase because you have spoken on the same topic for a number of times. If we start teaching, all of us would have faced the situation that when we go into a class, right, first semester, we are not so confident because while we have taken up a new subject, even we have to brush our knowledge and we have to put in a lot of practical ideas to make the class very interesting. But in the subsequent semester, when the same subject is being given to us for the third, fourth, fifth time, right, our confidence is much, much more. The third aspect is enthusiasm. You should be enthusiastic about the topic on which you are speaking. As I gave you an example of my friend who is a history teacher, the way she teaches history, right? Trust me, I have not seen any other person in my life taking classes with such a passion because she's passionate about history, and because of which her classes also are very, very interesting, right? So you should have enthusiasm to talk on a particular subject, and enthusiasm will come if the only when the topic will be of your area of interest, right? Third is clear objective and clear aim. As to if we're talking about maybe anyone is a teacher of statistics, and your objective is that you have to teach mean and mode in the class, right? So you have to have a clear objective that this is what have to be imparted during the class, and this is how I'll do it. So you have to logically sequence as to first I'll tell them what the mean is all about, then I'll tell them how to calculate mean, and then we'll tell them what is the relevance of knowing this statistical value in our day-to-day life. So we have defined our objective, and we also have put it uh, in a sequence, which makes our thoughts very clear and also helps in organizing our thoughts and imparting in the class. Well-written script. So as I said, when we are there in the class to talk about mean, mode, and median, so we define how we will go logically. So if we have made a PowerPoint presentation, right? So we should write down the points very nicely, very clear, and a very unambiguous manner, so that when we are there in the class, we are absolutely organized and we know what are the topics we need to touch upon and what is the logical sequencing of those topics. Effective start is also very important. Trust me, if we are able to start a conversation confidently, then it goes smooth. But when we are nervous in the beginning itself, right? Then at times we fumble, at times are not able to, clearly put forward our thoughts. So effective start is also good. We normally tell our students, I practice it myself also. And whenever I have to give a lecture, I first rehearse myself, right? Not in front of a mirror, but I'll just sit in front of my laptop and I'll rehearse as to, which aspect, which topics, which examples I'll be touching upon. And once you have a well-written script and you know how to start, the communication flow definitely will be very smooth. A clear voice, clear modulation. I think one of the participants also have written. Voice modulation is also very important. At times we have to, speak slowly in the class. Just compare in a way how a school teacher conducts the classes and how a university teacher conducts the classes, right? A school teacher will speak very, very slowly because they know that they are teaching the toddlers, right? But when we are teaching to our students, we talk in a normal way. So voice modulation and clear voice also is important for an effective communication. Then is speed at which we are talking, at which we are speaking, whether in the class or in online conferences. We have to be sure of that we are going at a speed so that the students, the participants are able to understand what we are trying to convey and can also at the same time catch up with us. Here I would like to share a very, very interesting example. We had one of the High Commissioner of US Embassy in India. He visited our campus and he shared one very interesting example because during the COVID time, most of the classes were happening in online mode and the teachers were giving videos to the students. So he said, what these students in US were doing. In fact, it happens in India also, that when we share our video with our students, they will run the video on 2x speed, right? The objective is to save time and also to complete the task, right? But when you are running a video at 2x speed, then definitely you can imagine as to how much will be the learning in the entire process. So speed also at times is important so that you can connect with the speaker and you are at the same frequency at which your teacher is in the classroom. The logical sequence I already have covered when I was talking about mean, mode, and median. Audience, right? A good audience is also very, very important, right? I'm glad to see today also, I love classes in an interactive way. I always, whenever I take my classes, I say it's not going to be a monologue until unless you will come prepared and we will have interaction. I'm not going to teach. And this is how I always structure my presentation, because until unless you have responses from the participants, it is very difficult to, keep on speaking, keep on talking for good 1 hour. So good audience also is important, who is responding, who is listening to you, right? Who also is sharing their ideas, their thoughts. That makes the entire communication process really interesting. Then is the local language. At times, depending upon the requirement, you also have to make your presentation on, or you have to speak in a local language. I was telling Manoj sir, I asked him, what should be the mode of communication? It should be Hindi, English, or mix of both. He said it has to be English, right? So before going off for any such kind of lecture, we check with the organizers as to what should be the mode of communication. And at times, if they say, both Hindi and English is fine, then we try and make our presentation in such effective end, right? So when I say logical sequence, you also should plan as to how you will end your presentation. So while I was talking about this example of mean, right, I said we should logically arrange our presentation. First, we should introduce what is mean. Second, we should tell our students how to calculate mean. And thirdly, we also should tell them as to, what is relevance of this whole exercise in our day-to-day life. Because today's student, right, the first question they'll come up with, why we have to calculate mean, where do we need it in our daily life, right? But if we tell them that this is how we need it, we need to know as to how calculation is being done, because it is also being used in our daily life. It will make the classroom more meaningful for the students. So effective end also is at times, at all the times is very important to end your communication. Time limit. For all our classes, we know that we have a 1 hour or a 1.5 hour duration, and we have to basically sum up our entire presentation during that time limit only, right? So time limit also is very important. And when we know the time limit, we have to structure our presentation accordingly. And last is courtesy. We always have the thank you slide, but that is not what I actually mean when I say courtesy. You also, I think one of the participant also wrote empathy, right? So So you also should try and understand as to what the participants are looking for, encourage them to speak, and also encourage them when they share their ideas, their thoughts. Only then we will see that the other participants in the class or in the online conferences will start sharing. Right. So that is also one of the very important aspects of communication. Moving on, right. So how, what are, I'm not saying that this is the nutshell, if you will follow each and every point which is there in the slide, right? By following each and everything, you can become a good communicator. These are, some tips which can help you in improving upon your communication skills. So first and a very important aspect is that you have to become a good listener. Right? At times, I'm sure all of you would have faced this thing in the class, that if a student is there in the class, right, the first question we ask them, why you are late, right? At times, students also have genuine concerns. Rather than, just telling them that you cannot enter the class because you're late and so on, we have to be empathetic, and we have to become a good listener and ask him as to why he is late, and then take a decision accordingly. Also, uh, another important aspect is that we should be aware about our own communication barrier. Right? Have you seen or have you faced certain mm, instances wherein you have jumped to your own conclusion? Anyone? If you would like to share any example wherein you have jumped to a conclusion without even listening to the other person. It happens in classes most of the time. When we ask questions to the students, and even before they finish, right, we interrupt them and tell them, no, this is not right, and this is what the answer should be. And then when the students explain in detail, then we realize that yes, he was right in responding to the answers. So at times what happens is that even without listening to the other person, we jump to conclusion. I'll give a very interesting example in the subsequent slide as to how it happens and how we uh, make our own conclusions. During the presentation, even during every piece, when we are at the receiving end, then and we have the other eminent person as a sender, at times we also have seen that even our thoughts start wandering, right? While the presentation are going on and we are busy, maybe thinking about a holiday in Goa. So I'm not saying it's happening right now, but at times this happens. So we also have to control our thoughts and ensure that we are engaged with the speaker. And because of this, we at times also filter out, we also try and filter out unimportant part of the conversation. We think ourselves, okay, fine, this I already know, so there is no point in listening to what is there in the slide, so leave it, right? But you never know that there could be very important point that can be conveyed during the entire communication process. The other thing is prematurely having a response before the person is done speaking. And the worst are arguing and debating, right? Even without understanding the point correctly, we start arguing. This all of us would have seen in TV channels, right? Definitely, we do not go to that extreme in classes, but definitely, that's a best example I can think of right now, wherein during a debate or whether on Republic TV and Aaj Tak and Z and so on, we have seen politicians fighting with each other even without listening to what they have to see, what they actually have to say, in fear of offending. At times, we restrict ourselves from sharing our thoughts because we think that we might offend the other person, but that might not be true. Right? The person who's speaking might be open to ideas, but this is our own inhibitions that we have, and we are scared of sharing our thoughts, whether in classroom or otherwise. Then we start feeling uncomfortable about expressing our emotions. So even though this is a communication session going on right now, but during behavioral science sessions, right, at times these things happen that the participants are not comfortable sharing their emotions. The messages are misinterpreted by the listener. lack of knowledge about a subject and topic being discussed, and non-verbal behavior. This all of us would have noticed that while a teacher is there in the class, right? The student are creating their own barriers, maybe by engaging in mobile phones. At times, we have seen, I was there in a class and the students were playing tic-tac-toe, right? So all these things also happen, and we have to control all such things while we are there inside the class, and we have to develop our own strategy as to how we can ensure that students don't indulge in all such kind of activities. So again, a question for all of you: which of the following are barriers to effective communication? Distraction, noise and movement, poor timing, or all of the above? I'm waiting for time. This time, Dr. Barnali is the first one to respond. She has written B, which is the correct answer. That if we are distracted, if there is a noise, or maybe the sessions are extended, initially it has been conveyed that it is a 1 hour session and it goes up to 1.5 hours, right? Then that also is a barrier to communication. I cannot read out all the name, but I can see that majority of you have shared your response. Thank you for that. I have another question. The next question will come after this slide. So when we talk about becoming a good communicator, I said that you have to develop, you have to become an active listener. And how you can become active listener? First of all, you have to pay attention. And, most of the people say that, you can look at the speaker directly and put aside your distracting thought, and don't mentally prepare a rebuttal, and listen to the speaker's body language also. So when we are saying listen, it is not just listening to what he's saying, right? Also listen to his body language, right? That also might communicate a lot of things. You can also show that, you're listening. Currently we are in the online mode, so all of you are showing that you're listening by responding in the chat window. So that's a good way to know that, all of us are still connected. You can nod occasionally, you can smile and use other facial expression, you can note your posture, and you can encourage the speaker. So by your responses, I'm being encouraged and, moving ahead to the other slides, and also to share good examples with all of you. You should provide feedback, right? Normally we say that you can, the listener can say that, if I've heard it rightly, this is what you said, right? So which means that you have been paying attention to the speaker. And fourth and very important thing is defer your judgment. At times, even without the entire going through, or even before going through the entire presentation, we have few questions. Normally, in most of the conferences, the protocol is that the questions are taken towards the end, right? Because they want to ensure that, first of all the speakers should share their knowledge, and after that, the question answers session can be held. The reason is that at times, when we have questions, during the course of action, the speaker might have touched upon all the questions. Last week also, I was taking presentation in the class, and while the student was presenting, I was writing down few questions. Of the class was on trade and services. So I was writing down questions that what is foreign direct investment in the services sector, which are the major companies. So as I was writing down the question, I saw that while by the time student completed his presentation, he had answered all the questions. So this is also is very important, that we have to be we have to have patience, and we should let the speaker complete the presentation, and then we should come up with our questions, right? So we should defer our judgment and respond appropriately. You should be candid, open, and honest in your responses. Assert your opinions respectfully. You might not agree with me, right? Everyone have their own thoughts and ideas. So we might not be converging on same set of thoughts and ideologies. We can have a different opinion, but you should share it with, you should share your responses, your concerns, your opinion respectfully. And treat the other person as you would like yourself to be treated. Right? So these are important aspects that all of us should take care of. Now, I have a question for you. that all of us as teachers, right, would have faced some sort of nuisance in the class, right? So how do you address such concerns? I don't know I'm sure majority of you are in teaching. I can see a lot of professors and doctors here. So, if there had been nuisance in the class that maybe a student stood up and started arguing, or he was using mobile phone and you asked him to not to use the phone and he started arguing, or maybe during exams he was talking to the student sitting next to him and you told him to be quiet and he started arguing. So there can be nuisance over number of issues, right? So if in past you have faced such kind of scenario, now I want you to share with me how you have tackled such situations. I want your responses on how you tackle any sort of nuisance in your class. What strategies you use to ensure that first of all there is no nuisance, and if there is a nuisance, how do you control that, or how do you react to any kind of nuisance in your class? I'm waiting for the responses. I'm again repeating, the question is that how do you react to any kind of nuisance in the class? I know it takes time to type and then submit the responses, so I'm waiting for the responses, which I'm sure definitely will be there. And while there is nuisance in the class, do you think being aggressive help, or whatever strategy you have used to control such kind of nuisance, right? Did aggression help you in controlling that, right? Are the question I'm trying to uh, seek responses from all of you. I'm sure all of you are thinking and writing. In a similar session which I had last week, the participants have shared that maybe you try to involve the student in the class, and at times we try to be calm and listen to the student what his or her problem was, and then we try to also provide a solution. So whenever any such kind of nuisance are there in the class, the only strategy we have to ensure that we are able to control the scenario is that we have to calm, listen to the student and provide a solution, right? If we will be aggressive, definitely it will create chaos in the entire class. We might not be able to have our lecture effectively and so on. So being patient is also one of the very important skill which a good communicator should have. So I have the first response. Yeah, that is what he has written, that the most important thing is to ask the student who's creating the nuisance as to what are the problems he is facing. And when once you're able to aware about once you are aware about the problems, then definitely you also can provide solution for that. So we have to be patient and listen to the person, listen to the student, and find out what problem the student is facing. I might be getting other responses. I'm being very optimistic. And in the meantime, I'll move to the next slide, which again is a quiz, right? And the question is that as a listener, what should you do every 5 to 10 seconds in a conversation to show that you're paying attention? A is look at your phone, B, interrupt the speaker, C, nod your head and say, and D, walk away in boredom, right? So this is the question. Dr. Sadiq Ahmed also have mentioned that we have to help them by starting lecture and try to make them attentive. We can involve them in our session. We can give them a question and tell them to come up with the solution. So involving the student, listening to them patiently are some of the strategies which can help them in overcoming such problems. The question for you, I think this is the last question which I have in the presentation. And what according to you is the correct answer? Anupam Sharma ji have mentioned C. Lakshmi Raman and 235186. Michael. Right. Good to see that all of you are attentive and are responding to the questions. Good, everyone. Thank you. So this is the most important part of my presentation, wherein we talk about what are effective 7 C's of effective communication, and each one of them is very, very important, right? So we will start with the first one, which is clarity. So to ensure that we have absolute clarity in our communication, so first of all, when we talk about clarity, it actually means transfer of idea from the sender to the receiver with absolute clarity. And absolute clarity will come through clear thinking. And clear thinking you'll have only when you'll be full of knowledge. You'll have crystal clear content on the topic on which you'll be speaking, right? And apart from that, to ensure more clarity, you also can use common and simple language in your communication, in your presentation, in your lecture and so on. Construct effective sentences and short paragraphs. You know, we have one of our faculty in our institution, and the person used to had a very good writing skills, but the problem was that her one sentence was a paragraph in itself, right? Which if we are talking about a A4 size page, right? So her one sentence was of 3 to 4 lines, right? So it was a paragraph in itself. And to understand what has been written in the paragraph, you have to read it at least twice or thrice. So that thing should not happen. Construct small and simple sentences, use common and simple language, right? That will, because, you know, as a teacher, I might be familiar with the technical terms and jargons and so on, but our students are not, right? And to make them understand these technical terms and jargons, we have to use simple language. Use concrete word instead of abstract word and avoid unnecessary information. Use only those examples which are relevant for the class and also for the topic, right? So we should keep the information and sentences and words as simple as possible to ensure that there is complete clarity in our communication. Second is correctness. You can also see this sentence which example which I've used, right? So if I simply say I love baking my family and my friends, right? The other person will say that, you know, this person has gone mad. And problem is there is no problem in my ideas. The problem is that I have not constructed the sentence correctly. The correct sentence should have been I love baking my family and my friends. So, you know, introduction of these 2 commas and 1 full stop changes the meaning of the entire sentence, right? So we also have to ensure that by using correct punctuation, grammar, capitalization, we are able to impart the correct information to the listener, right? So correctness here refers to correct grammar, correct punctuation, and correct spelling. And thankfully, we are living in a world wherein technology is of great help. And when we are typing something on Word or maybe on PowerPoint, then we have this option that if the spelling is not correct, you'll get a red underline. And now we also have various tools like Grammarly and so on, which if you can install on your laptop, it also will tell you whether the sentence is grammatically correct or not. It will also give you options as to how you can correct the sentence, right? So we also can use such kind of tools to ensure that we are able to impart correct knowledge, correct information to the students. Unfortunately, during our times when I was doing my graduation or my undergraduation and during my college days, we did not had such apps and tools and so on. So if our sentence is grammatically incorrect, right, only teacher could correct it. But thankfully, we have a lot of various tools, and I advise you to use Grammarly is free of cost, right? You do not have to pay anything unless you are planning to have use the advanced version of Grammarly. It's free of cost. You can download and install in a laptop, and it will tell you as to which sentences are incorrect and how you can correct those sentences. Conciseness, which means that it should be brief and complete. If we are talking about mean, mode, and median, then our presentation should only and only be focusing on only these three aspects. We should not be talking about introducing standard deviation in between, right? So we have to be absolutely concise and precise in what we are trying to impart in our sessions. Then courtesy, which means politeness, right? It's a old saying that everyone gains when courtesy reigns. Right? So we should use expression that show respect. We should be appreciative of the receiver's point of view, right? Or we should avoid humor, right? And secondly, any kind of discriminatory language related to race, color, gender, creed, etc., should also be avoided in our communication. I was telling you about these political debates on television, right? The entire thing flares up only when any of the political leader make any kind of statement on race, gender, creed, etc. Right? We should avoid from using such kind of language in our communication. And secondly, if we are communicating with the other person, we also should actively listen to as to what is their point of view. We might not agree with their point of view, but definitely they have right to put across to us. So we should listen to them, and then we also should communicate to them what is the right approach to which they may and may not agree. But we cannot force them to believe that whatever I'm saying is correct. Then correctness, concreteness, right? So we should avoid using vague and general statements in our communication. So you can see towards the end, I've given this example. See, if I say that India's economy is growing at a very fast pace, and soon India will become one of the leading global economies. It's a very vague sentence, right? But if I say, and you might not trust me, you might say, "Mazak kar raha hai, chhod do." There's no point in believing in this statement. But if I say that, sorry, there's a spelling mistake out here. If I say, according to IMF, International Monetary Fund, which is a leading international organization, if I say that according to IMF, India is projected to grow at 6.8% in the current fiscal year and will become the third largest economy behind US and China by financial year 2028. You will think, हाँ दम है बात, but बात में कुछ दम है, because this is a statement which is being made by IMF, right, which is a leading international organization. The first sentence is vague, to which you might agree, you might not agree, right? But the second sentence is absolutely correct because I've used figures which have been provided by a leading organization. So when we say concreteness, try to have such kind of figures, statistics in your presentation. Right? It will make the other person believe you. Otherwise, vague sentences will lead to many questions which you yourself might not be able to answer. It's always advisable to have very concrete information in your presentation, and for that you can use facts, figures, and other very reputed sources to quote and put across your point. Then consideration, which means that you have to prepare message with with the receiver in mind. So I've taken this. I like this cartoon while I was searching on the net. Right, the question given to the student is that you have to write down the chemical composition for water. The teacher was expecting that the student will write H2O, right? But what student have written, right? H, he had written all the alphabets from H2O. So while we are giving a presentation, we have to keep in mind as to who is the receiver. So before Manoj called me and conveyed to me that this is the session I have to take. So first thing that we normally ask in such a scenario is who are the audience, who are the speakers, and then we make our presentation accordingly. Had this presentation been for industry professionals, the examples would have been different, right? So that we can relate with the audience. So while we are giving the presentation, we have to keep in mind as to who is the audience. Normally, teachers who are teaching maybe finance and statistics and such kind of technical subjects. The common problem which the student faces that, as a finance faculty, I might be having absolutely clear concept on various accounting principles and how a balance sheet have to be prepared. But for a student, he might not be knowing as to what are accounting principles, what is credit, what is debit, and so on. I can give my own example. I was a science student and I've done my graduation in science. And after that, I did my MBA from Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. So imagine my first class for a science student, right? The first class in an MBA college, and the faculty is teaching them what is financial statement, what is balance sheet, right? I don't even know what are asset, what are liabilities. And the first class which I'm attending, I'm being taught about what a balance sheet is, right? So these are the common mistakes that we normally do. If I'm going to my class and I tell them that this is GDP, this is GNP, right? Student might not be able to relate with these terms. So we have to ensure that we are able to make it simple, right? And are also able to ensure that the students are able to grasp the concept by maybe giving them appropriate example, and also by spending more time on the topic which are difficult to understand, right? So these are various factors that we have to keep in mind uh, while we are giving a presentation. We should focus on you instead of me. I should not be boasting about what I know, but I should try to understand what are the gaps, right? Which the students have in their mind, which are the areas on which they need more information. So I should focus more on that rather than going through my presentation as it is. So we should try and understand the needs and problems of the receiver and use optimistic and positive language while we are there in the class. Completeness. Remember when all of us were small kids, the questions which we used to ask our parents was, what is this? Why it is there? How it was created. So these questions are there in mind of our students also. Maybe a student who is sitting for a marketing class or maybe for an economic class, he's attending the class for the first time. So he or she also might have questions like what, when, where, why, who, and how. So we have to, when we are making our presentations, when we are there inside the classes, we have to ensure that our entire presentation answers all these questions, right? And if we will be able to include all the points which answers all these questions, our presentations will be complete, right? So when we have completed our presentation, we also should run through it to ensure that there should not be any gaps. So our communication in terms of whether we are writing a research paper or we are making a presentation for the class or we are writing down points that we will be discussing in the class, we have to ensure that all the aspects have been covered. And if any aspect has not been covered, then at least we should have knowledge so that we can tackle the questions which will be there towards the end in a seminar like this or in a classroom. So those were the 7 C's of communication. This slide, we discuss about what are the common challenges that as a teacher we face, right? Time limitations. even though we think that this particular topic will take 2 hours, but we have time limitations. We have to ensure that we try and complete the topic within the time frame assigned to us, right? But what we can do is, so for that, we can plan our classes accordingly. But after that, still after that, the students have any doubt, normally we tell the students, you can meet us after the class. So even when the class is over, if any student have a doubt, we call them out after the class and we try and have discussion so that we are able to answer all the questions, all the doubts which they have in their mind. Perception of the teachers. This is a very common thing. That even before a student comes for the class, he knows about each and every teacher. So they make their own perception, right? But over a time, a teacher also is able to improve upon their classes, their teaching, and so on. Before COVID, we only were using PowerPoint or maybe whiteboard for taking the classes. But during COVID, we also have learned how to use various online modes, how to use various online tools for our classes, right? So and in one of the slide, I said that you should have an effective start. So the first class itself will create an impression on the student as to how good a teacher is, right? So we have to create perception for ourselves in the student's mind during the first few classes itself. If we are able to have a connect with the student, definitely the entire semester is going to be smooth, right? But if we are not able to establish that first connect, then definitely we find it difficult uh, in our classes and subsequent sessions, which I'm sure we will be able to do in maybe six to seven classes. Teacher preparation, lack of knowledge. In today's time, everything is moving so fast. When we talk about technology, right? Concepts that we might have which we might have learned today, might be obsolete tomorrow. So even we have to update our knowledge. So we have to keep on enriching our content. I teach international business, and trust me, in each and every class, we try and take examples from these scenarios around us. So if I tell them how to understand the economic environment of a country, right, rather than telling them that you can read these indicators, if we tell them this is what has happened in Sri Lanka, right, it will help them in understanding better because they know that this actually has happened. I'm sure most of the history teachers, they face this problem that the students say, "जो हो चुका हमें क्यों पढ़ा रहे हैं?" right? And we are not able to relate with that. So if we are able to relate our classes, conduct our classes in such a way that we are able to relate it with what's happening around us, the classes will be more interesting. And lastly, I've just used, because in the beginning I said that as a sender, we also are communicating with our peers, with our subordinates, with top management. And the most commonly used mode of communication with them is email. So there are certain email etiquettes that we should keep in mind while communicating with the parents, with the students, with the top management, and so on. Normally, when we are communicating with a student, or maybe when a student is writing a mail to us, they'll simply write, I need an extra class. That's it. They'll send an email to me saying that I need an extra class. Then I'll write to them, you're from which program, which section, which semester, and so on. Right? So we have to ensure whenever we are sending any communication, it has to be complete. So that is what, when we were discussing about 7 C's of communication, one of the C also was complete. Right? If you are writing a mail to me, right, that the session was good, but then I would like to know who is the participant. So if you mention that you are XYZ from ABC college and so on, that will make your email more complete, right? So first of all, we should have a professional email address, which as a faculty, all of us definitely have, right? We advise our students also to use professional email ID, because we have seen that students, when they join us in college, they are, really fond of having email IDs like cute little pie and strong rocky and gmail.com and so on. So we, apart from using professional email IDs ourselves, we must tell our students also to follow it. Email should have a clear subject line. We should maintain a professional tone. If we are in a stress, right, don't be in a hurry to write a mail. Wait for some time. Wait for your emotions to calm down and then write a mail. It will be more effective than writing a mail when you are in absolutely stressed condition. Keep the copy clear and concise. Mark recipient in the appropriate tag. You should keep in mind who should be there in CC, who should be there in two, and so on. Very important, read the copy twice before sending. At times it happens, we realize, oh, I committed a mistake, I have to send a mail again. And then we say, ignore the previous mail, right? So it's always better to read the mail twice before hitting the send button. And be mindful as to who all should be in reply all. Don't share controversial topics. It's better to, on controversial topics, it is better to have face-to-face communication rather than uh, having communication over the mail. And never email any confidential or private information. Email signature etiquette is a very important aspect. You know, whenever we have to send email, normally we write our name and name of the institution and email ID and phone number and so on. So there is a provision in Outlook and also in Gmail wherein you can create your signature. So if my signature is Alka Maurya, Amity International Business School, Amity University, and so on, I type that in the signature, this thing, and it will reflect in each and every mail. So if possible, try and create your own signature. Avoid using excessive abbreviation. Always introduce yourself first if you're writing an email to the stranger. That is actually very important. Shorten or hyperlink the URL. Right, there also is an option if you are using MS Forms or YouTube link and so on. There also is a provision that you can shorten and it will make your email more concise. Check your attachment and check your formatting. And when we are communicating over video conference, the first, which all of us have learned over a period of time by committing the mistake ourselves, that we must mute ourselves when we are not speaking. Use technology to fully engage remote participants, because online teaching, this is a major constraint. You don't know whether the person who is there on the other side is listening to or not, right? So you always must ensure that you engage your participants. Normally during our online classes, this is what we have learned during COVID, that we were being told that we should have quizzes in between that will help us in engaging the audience, right? So if we are using any such kind of medium, there are various tools like Kahoot and quizzes and so on that one can use to communicate with the remote participants. Wear work appropriate clothing, right? This reminds us of the WhatsApp images that circulated widely during COVID, wherein a man was sitting in front of a laptop, right? And he was wearing a formal blazer and shorts, right? Because only the upper part of the body was visible to the audience, right? But this definitely is not possible in face-to-face classes. So in online mode also, we must ensure that we are wearing work appropriate clothing. Frame the camera accordingly. You know, whenever all of us log on Zoom, there is a window which prompts that use camera. So we adjust the camera, we adjust, look at the background, whether it is appropriate or not, and then we switch on the camera. Have the right kind of light so that the audience can see your face clearly. Look into the camera and pay attention. And lastly, it's a very known phrase, and we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So we should decide which one we should use more often. So be an active listener, right? And when you're communicating, ensure that you have absolute clarity, absolute confidence, and trust me, your sessions will be very interesting. So Manoj sir, this is what I had from my side. In case there are any questions, we can take the questions right now.
Yeah, Madam, already your session is very interactive. So I think all the questions, whatever the doubt in the middle you are asking and the participant are replying. So even then, if any participant have any doubt, yeah, anything, no, you may ask the participant. Please ask first if you have some question, because Madam have to go for your class.
It is not just about questions. Even if you think
Yeah,
that
yeah, some
you want
queries,
to
something, then you may ask it.
advices, anything, or any opinion that you would like to share will be appreciated.
One student
Dr.
is, madam, just
Prasanji,
asking. Yeah, yeah.
how to deal with rude student effectively. I faced this scenario in the morning today when the exam was going on, and the student was arguing with the invigilator, right? He was saying that, you have to give me more time to complete the exam, and which was not possible as per university guidelines, right? So normally what we do is that we try and involve 2, 3 faculty members to ensure that we are able to counsel the student and tell him that he is right. The only way that we can deal with rude students is that we have to listen to them. Just listen to them for 5 minutes, right? And after that, they'll listen to you for 30 minutes, right? So that is how I try to tackle rude student. And later on, once the class is over, then you can tell them that, this is where you were right and you have to be polite and courteous and so on. And keep on asking questions, right? If the student is having so many doubts, normally what I do is after every 10 minutes, I ask him, do you have any question? Should I proceed ahead and so on? And I make them sit in front, right? So that they do not disturb the other classes. But the effective strategy only is to listen to them for at least for 5 minutes, and you'll see that you'll be able to tackle them and communicate with them. So thank you for your wonderful messages on the chat window, and thank you for being such a lovely audience. And trust me, these sessions are very meaningful, very interesting when the communication is both ways. And thanks once again for being such a wonderful audience.
Yeah. Thank you so much, madam, for ready to deliver your lecture very short notice. Okay, so from HRDC side, we are very much thankful for your nice lecture. Every participant, they enjoy this lecture, very useful for them. So with this, you are in very hurry, means as you told before class, you have class, so I'm not going to take your class. Thank you so much, madam. You may leave now.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all the participants once again. Thank you.
So, dear participant, in with this lecture today, we completed our all the sessions. Okay. So again, tomorrow 4 o'clock we will 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock again we will start our class tomorrow. So we will meet. Okay. Some student is asking in HRDC only 26 January, 15 August, and 2nd October there is a holiday. All other, even Holi and Diwali also, we have to conduct the classes. Okay, because we have